when there was the debate in the legislature to rush this through, was there any suggestion by the government of what they might use this power to do?
No, and that's disconcerting. Now, so far, to my knowledge, the government has not used these new powers yet. But the only thing that was stated by, first by the health minister, Tyler Shandro, and I read through the Hansard, and as well as another cabinet minister, was, this is to better look after the health and safety. This is to better protect Albertans and protect the health and safety of Albertans. Just those platitudes were the only justification that was put forward. I would actually have more confidence in Jason Kenney's government in pushing this bill through if they said, well, look, here's an example or two or three examples of why or how a cabinet minister might need to create a new law on the fly or create a new offense. That's the other thing. A cabinet minister can single-handedly, without any legislative review by the Legislative Assembly, can create new offenses. Now, they cannot be retroactive, but he can say, well, it's an offense to walk outside unless you're on a special government-approved list of people who are allowed to go outside. The fines and penalties are draconian as well. They were already a maximum fine of $2,000 for first offense for disobeying the Public Health Act. That's been jumped up to $100,000 that you can be fined for disobeying the Public Health Act. And on a subsequent offense, $500,000 fines. So that's pretty serious as well.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to continuously reach back to what Sam Goldstein told us last week, but it is my only source of knowledge on this subject, John, so forgive me for doing that. And I'm sure that Sam, if he would be watching this, would cringe that I'm not getting it just perfectly. But one of the things he told me is that even in these emergency laws, while you're obviously correct, and this bill clearly, the way you describe it clearly says the democratic machinery is eliminated. The laws just come into existence without the typical, first reading, second reading, committee hearings, third reading, vote, etc. So the laws are created undemocratically, at least in contrast to our normal processes. They still must be implemented in accordance with the Charter of Rights principles. So you mentioned banning people from walking on the street, and I think that is something that we probably will see in some form, but there would be some requirement that it be the least intrusive measure that makes sense, that it does make sense, that there's some pressing need, and that while perhaps some rule against reopening a theater might survive that test, some rule against walking by yourself in the countryside might not meet the test. Again, I'm certainly not presenting myself as a defender of Bill 10. I actually haven't even read the bill, and I'm not certainly putting myself forward as a defender of Jason Kenney's government. I'm just trying to find out the four corners of what's going on here, and if this is in fact just the Alberta example of what's being done in every province, territory, and the federal government, because I think the whole country is acting under some sort of emergency legislation right now.
Well, the charter does apply, which is good, and the courts are largely shut down, but they supposedly are entertaining emergency applications. So, our organization, the Justice Center, for example, if we felt that there was an egregious and unnecessary, unreasonable, unjustified violation of charter freedoms, we would, fax file or e-file, and we would hope that the courts would look at that as an emergency and choose to hear it. But we're not trigger happy. We understand that there can be temporary violations of charter freedoms. I mean, your mobility rights, your freedom of association, freedom of peaceful assembly, some restrictions on your freedom of religion, restrictions on your right to liberty and security of the person. some restrictions on a temporary basis, can be justified, and but we're just watching very closely to make sure that no line is crossed where it really becomes irrational, unreasonable type of a law or order. I find it disconcerting that you hear media reports about people getting tickets for being alone in a park, or they're with their own child in a park. British Columbia is shutting down all parks over Easter. And it's like, why can't we just do social distancing in a public park? Why does it have to be shut down entirely? So, we have to be very vigilant. And like the temporary income tax that's now a century old, we have to push very, very hard after this emergency is over to make sure we get all of our rights and freedoms back in full.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.